Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. We're almost done. The international break is almost finished, and I promised I'd do a Q&A, which took me a little bit of time to get the questions. I mean, thank you very much. Incredible amount of questions. I mean, I think there's something like 600 comments under the video, and I'd say there are a fair few, couple of hundred of them were questions. So obviously, I don't have enough time to answer every single question, but what hopefully I've done is I've taken 34, which sounds ridiculous when you talk about the hundreds that there were, but obviously if there's any repetition of different questions, I've tried to slightly amalgamate them into some questions. But apologies as always if I've missed any or I didn't get to answer your question entirely in full, but obviously you've got a certain time limit on these, otherwise I could be here sitting talking for like 5 hours. So even 34 questions, if you work it out, I haven't got too much time to speak about each of them, but I'm certainly going to give it a go. So many topics, some brilliant questions, some really ones I've I wrote them all down, and I'm even thinking to myself, crikey, how am I going to answer that? So you'll get to very much see me, I think, thinking on the fly for a lot of these. So let's get cracking straight into it. The first one comes from Crickster. What will happen to Jose Mourinho if we don't make the top four? I think there's a couple of variables to that. I think, obviously, if Spurs were to win the Carabao Cup final, beat Manchester City, obviously he would have fulfilled one of his objectives, which was to bring silverware to Tottenham. I think that would play a part. I think also if you saw a real kind of almost like a surge in momentum towards the end of the season, and you saw, I mean, this is a tough thing with where we're at right now, is that even with the Villa victory, I think let's use the word that Mourinho used, the scar from Croatia and probably North London derby is not going to heal for a little while. However, on paper, Spurs have won 6 of the last 8 matches. They're actually one of the most informed teams around, which is so bizarre when you think kind of feelings that are right now. And obviously that's not to excuse what has just happened, but there is a little bit of momentum overall with Tottenham in the bigger picture. So I'd say that if, say, Tottenham, I don't know, if Tottenham were to say, let's say, finish 5th, but there was a real feeling of the season was finishing in a really good way and you could kind of see where they were heading under Mourinho, then I'd imagine that it would not be such a cut and dried, let's make a change decision in the summer. If Spurs obviously completely tail off as the season goes on, they also lose the final, then yeah, of course, conversations are going to be had and we'll see where we're at. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure if it's top 4 is the deciding factor. I think there's probably a few little things in there. Essentially, Tottenham need to feel, and with the players have to be on board. I think that's another crucial thing. But I think Daniel Levy has to presume look at it all and say, right, okay, going into next season, I can see how we're going to get better. If there's a case of looking at it and you kind of feel it's only going to plateau or get worse, then that's when decisions are made. So let's see how that goes. Alex Samuels asks, what do you think the plan is for ENIC? Has the pandemic changed plans to sell? To be fair to Levy, in every single thing I've ever seen him comment on, and most recently there was a trust meeting, was it maybe 6-8 months ago, possibly longer. During that, he very clearly said there was no intention to sell the club. Personally, and this is just a personal opinion, it's not really based on anything I've been told or heard, but personally, I'd be surprised probably if in 10 years' time Tottenham have the same owners. I do kind of feel that, and I can understand the logic, and I think a lot of people have said this, the whole getting the training ground sorted, getting the stadium sorted, then you've got a very attractive product, I suppose is the best way to do it, to then sell on. So I'd imagine, I think long term, they've been in charge for 20 years now. I don't know if I see them as, being there in 30, 40 years' time as an entity. I do think, I wouldn't be entirely stunned, and I know this will upset a lot of people, but I wouldn't be stunned if anyone does take over the club that Daniel Levy has kept on in some capacity. Because say whatever you will about on-pitch stuff, decisions made, transfers, things like that, off the pitch, there's no doubting what that guy has done off the pitch. I know for a lot of fans that's not the most important thing, but I think if you're an investor coming in, and you wanted someone to ensure that side continued to grow, then I probably think you would look to try and keep him involved. But again, this is just spitballing. This is just an opinion thing. I think right now clearly isn't the right time to sell a football club. Everything, the market-wise, has gone down completely. I don't imagine that would be likely something that happens anytime, in the next few months or so. But certainly, I do think long-term wise, I'd be surprised if a really top offer comes in. And again, it's all about valuations. Isn't this the biggest thing with Tottenham? It's the valuations of players, valuation of naming rights, which I know I've got a question on later, valuations on various things. That's where I feel that they maybe not expect too much, but have a place of very high pride and value in what they've done. So that's that one. Again, sorry if I'm going to have to kind of rocket through some of these and get as many done as I can, so I can get many people's questions in there. Rover Team asks, is it true that Paolo Dybala is coming? It wouldn't be a Tottenham Hotspur Q&A without a question about Paolo Dybala. I saw he's cropped up again this week. The Italian media is desperate, I think, to push Dybala in Tottenham's general direction. Right, how do we put this across without... I don't want to sound patronising. I don't want to be too repetitive on stuff I've previously said. Paolo Dybala, obviously a player that Spurs have liked in the past. Talented player. What I would say is, finance-wise, Spurs would have to raise a lot of money to buy him. Even though I think his contract is, I can't remember if it's in the last 12 months or 24 months, but it's getting towards its end. I still think in terms of the money that would be required to buy him, it would be a lot. And there's always been a part of me that kind of felt, was that something that more was a Pochettino signing? A fellow Argentine, someone that I think would have, loved playing for Pochettino. I don't know whether reports are mainly just lobbing him in there because of that previous interest or not. But for me, finance-wise, I think there are other priorities right now, which again, I think I've got some questions on. So, yeah, hey, I think it'd be terrific. I'd love to see Paolo Dybala at Tottenham. But like I say, I think they would have to be... I think that would be... Oh, God, and I don't want to say this is going to be the case, but I think you'd have to lose a mega player to have the funds to then bring in players like Paolo Dybala. Right. Jan asks, Jan, so apologies if mispronounced, it might be Jan, I don't know, from Estonia, asks, what under-18 players might have slipped under the radar when we talk about talented young players at Tottenham? Maxim Pascozzi has been called up for Estonia this week. Are there any others that we might not be aware of? Maxim's a great one. Obviously, with the Estonian links, I can see why his name's been raised. If any of you weren't aware of this, I've done a couple of little pieces on him in the last week. Maxim's 18-year-old centre-back at Tottenham. Plays for the under-18s. He was called up, I think, initially to the under-18s team with Estonia. And then what happened was, as in this current world as it is, with the players dropping out with COVID and stuff like that, or unable to travel, Maxim got elevated right up to the senior squad. And he started all 3 matches this week. Estonia, obviously, they're not a team that is going out there and smashing it in terms of they're not one of the big boys. Of course they're not. They're a nation that is very much a work in progress, I suppose, is the best way to put it on the football pitch. Although I think it was 1-0 against Sweden. They did well in that one. But yeah, Maxim's gone out there and started all 3 games. So terrific for him. Talented young centre-back. Let's see how he develops. But yeah, that was a terrific week for him. In terms of other players, I mean, we know the obvious ones. We know the Alfie Devines, the Dane Scarlets, Dennis Sirkin, Harvey White was going slightly older there. Troy Parrott, of course, as well. I'd say I like Janelle Bennett. I always have. Whenever I watched him play, I think he's very direct. I like the way he plays. He can play out wide. He can also come slightly into the middle and score goals. One to keep an eye on. Obviously, Dylan Markandays got on the bench, almost made his debut, but not quite in one of the Europa League games. So those 2, I think, perhaps need loans just to kind of develop. But a kid that I, keep hearing a lot of good things about, and It's a difficult one because for me, if anyone followed my stuff, I always used to watch a lot of the academy games. I was able to get there, which is a brilliant thing that my job allows me to do. But obviously, with restrictions right now, I haven't been able to see any. But there's a young lad who did very well. I think he scored, was it 3 or 4 against Chelsea not too long ago? I think it was either earlier this month, about a month ago or so, is Roshan Mathurin. Again, you know my pronunciation, it's always horrific. But yeah, no, I've spoken to a few people within the club about him, and there's a lot of belief in his quality, his talent. With him, as with any young player, it's just about making sure he continues to stay focused, works incredibly hard, and, you know, as with any young player, don't fully believe in your talent, believe in the work that you've got to get there to make your talent shine and do what it can do. But yeah, very, very talented attacking player who I think we'll be hearing hopefully a lot more of in the next year or so. And then, like I say, anyone else you've seen, Niall Johns obviously came out, Marcel Lavinia again, a bit older, but it'll be interesting to see whether he gets a loan this season. And I'm sure there's loads of forgotten. Spurs Academy is actually in quite a good place at the moment. I think a lot of the older players are probably going to move on this summer, or they'll go on other loans. And I think that many of them went out on loans meant that a lot of the younger players got to have more game time for the under-23s. And I think that's helped progress a lot of those young players. And I think that's why you're seeing the likes of, Dane Scarlett has been stepping up to the under-23s and he's scoring goals. And I think that's really good for them. I think before there was almost this barrier of, not to say it's probably too harsh to call them a barrier, but you know what I mean. There was this kind of group of players that perhaps were unlikely to play for the first team. But obviously, again, the academy is all about not just the first team. It's about, it sounds so cynical, but almost creating products, players that you can sell, and also on a personal level, develop players to be able to play in the professional game. And I think there was this kind of little level of players that perhaps were not going to break into Tottenham's first team, but were good enough for the Football League that have kind of had to move on, and that's allowed a younger bunch to all get a go. And I think we're seeing maybe the fruits of those labours right now. Right, next question. Lappers82. Is this Hugo Lloris's last season? If so, who replaces him? Hugo Lloris, from everything I've told, it would be a surprise if he goes this summer. Obviously, he'll only have 12 months left on his deal this summer. From what I'm told, Spurs are certainly open and made him aware that they're open to having giving him a new deal. Obviously, I think in today's world, a lot of these new deals for players are probably not going to be on bigger money. They're probably going to be on potentially less money, or certainly on similar terms, because football clubs, a lot of them are not broke, but they're in a bad way. And I think you'll see that even at some of the big clubs. I'm hearing that the ones with deep pockets have been offering players contracts on lower wages. But Lloris, I think it's up to him. I think there's certainly on his part has been a wish to go back to France to end his career. And also I think there's a little interest in MLS there as well. But at 34, he's still probably got a little while left as a goalkeeper. We're not saying he's about to retire or anything. So from everything I'm hearing, he is probably more likely to stay for another year at least. In terms of replacements, worried to go. It's a difficult one because obviously all the links are with Nick Pope. Nick Pope even. He, for me, doesn't fit the Tottenham profile. I know people would like him, but at 29 years old, I think he is this summer. Talk of being 30, 35 plus million. That's not a Tottenham transfer. They don't do that. Mike Mangnen, I think it is another one. I think he's at, is it Lille? He's 25 years old. I'm told, a lot of links again with him. I'm told he's not really one particularly that they're looking at. I think there's some people within the club that like it. Obviously, I think Nuno Santos, the goalkeeping coach, would have worked with him at Lille, so obviously he'll know him well, and I'm sure he would be pushing his claims. But I think Spurs in an ideal world would want someone like Dean Henderson, but the problem is this isn't an ideal world, and someone like Dean Henderson, who's a young goalkeeper, only signed, I think it was a 6-year deal with Man United last season. It's going to be big money. Big money. Sorry, I've just looked at the clock and seen how many minutes I've done, and we're only 5 questions in, so I've got to crack on. But yeah, I don't think, unless there's a surprise bid comes in that for Lloris and the club is too good to turn down, I'd be surprised, and I think a lot of people within Tottenham would be as well if Lloris goes this summer. John Horton asks, reckon we could swap Eric Dier for Carlos Vinicius? I get the logic, because obviously the Portuguese background, but I think Eric Dier, certainly with his sporting roots, probably wouldn't be massively keen on the Benfica move. And also, with no disrespect to Benfica, because they're a really good team, and obviously Jan Vertonghen's there right now, and it was good for him at that time of his career. I'd be surprised maybe if Eric Dier at this point in his career wanted to go to Benfica. And again, that's nothing to do with Benfica. I think it's probably more maybe the level of the league right now in terms of what he might feel he can get. But yeah, I think we'll come to that. We'll talk about potential exits a bit later on. I think there's a question or two about that. And also Carlos Vinicius. So I haven't forgotten about him. Don't worry, I'm just trying to move quickly. Mick Doherty asks, I don't know if he's in relation there to to Matt. Giovanni Lo Celso has been dividing opinion with the fan base. What's your opinion on him? I think he's been unfortunate. I think the only reason he divide the fan base is because of the injuries. And again, this is yet another player who has had no real major injuries until he comes to Tottenham, and then bang, everything hits him within his first 2 seasons. I think he's a really talented player. I think he's a guy that plays slightly deeper, and that reflects in his assists and goals. I would like to see more of those, I think, along with other people, especially if he's going to play further up the pitch. But I think this little international break will have been a big help for him. I think he'll be able to work on his fitness a lot. And I think we'll see, injuries aside, hopefully, I think we'll see a Giovanni Lo Celso who can make a real impact in this last 2 months of the season. So, I'm a Lo Celso fan. He's only, is he 24? Yeah, I think he's 24 now. He's still so young. Right, I'm going to get this pronunciation right. Heung-min, I may have killed that pronunciation, sorry, Heung-min. How different do you find doing journalism on a football club you support? Good question. I've covered, mostly before I did Tottenham, it was different levels of football. I did some League 2 stuff. I covered Stevenage a bit. A lot of non-league football as well I covered. I'd say it's the same logic. I'd like to think that however I covered those clubs back then is the same way I do with Tottenham, is just giving everything to it. I think, obviously you've made no attempt to cover the fact that, obviously when I was a young boy, my dad would take me to Tottenham. That was my team growing up. I think you're slightly changed when you see what's behind the curtain, if you understand what I mean. I think you probably, in one respect, lose a little bit of the passion, which is a sad thing. But on the other side, you see a lot more of what goes on, which gives you slightly more of an objective viewpoint in terms of understanding why certain decisions are made, maybe knowing more about a player and understanding why they might not be in the best form and things like that. I wouldn't say. I think maybe perhaps I go too much the other way and try to not be having been a fan influence what I say, and maybe that's, you guys might notice that, and I tend not to get too angry and I tend not to get too giddy. I always thought, this is something I might have said before, but I always felt when I went to cover my first game that in the press box, if Spurs scored, I'd cheer or do something daft. But I never have. I think certainly right from the start, I was so aware that I wanted to be professional and do this job in the right way that I think, that's never really seeped into it. Obviously, I always want the best for Tottenham. But then on the flip side, whenever I covered clubs in the past, I always wanted the best for all of them as well. Because it's more fun to cover a club when they're doing well than it is to have to write about problems and issues and changes and things like that. So, it's funny. It's great. I love it. If I go back in time and told my 8-year-old self, you're going to cover Tottenham Hotspur as your full-time job when you're older, probably wouldn't have believed me. Probably would have run away screaming, saying, "Who's this weirdo?" But it's good fun. It is good fun. Stepbro asks, what are your thoughts on Ryan Sessegnon and his future at Tottenham? Ryan Sessegnon had a really good season at Hoffenheim. So really good. He's had a season interrupted a little bit by injury. He missed about 7 Bundesliga matches about a month and a half ago. But on the whole, the loan has served its purpose. At Hoffenheim, he's playing either as a left back or a left wing back, and that's exactly was kind of the point of this deal. So I've got really itchy nose today. And he's getting that game time. He's getting an experience of a very different culture, but also in a league that's got similarities to the Premier League. In terms of his future, I still believe, I think there might be another loan on the cards in the summer. And that's purely because unless Real Madrid invoke the buyback clause for Reguilon, which they might, and it's up to him whether he wants to go or not. But if that doesn't happen, I think there's probably likely to be Reguilon and Ben Davies there next season. I know some people have this thing about Ben Davies and wanting to upgrade and all of this, but I think Ben Davies is such a good squad player, such a versatile guy, such an important person in the dressing room as well. I think it would have to take quite a big bid and for Davies to want to go. And Davies plays a fair bit of the season. So, yeah, I think those two would probably be in place. And I think for Sessegnon then, that means another season on loan. Just learning his trade, really. You know, he's got a long deal. It can be done. There's no reason for it to kind of all be rushed. So, we'll see. Like I say, positions might change, people might go, and then he comes back and he slots straight in. There's also Dennis Sirkin at left back as well. Very young, talented player who's had a really tough time. Family bereavement, injury. He'll come on in the next year or so. He'll get better. And you think maybe if you let Sessegnon go out, then Sirkin can kind of hang around and pick up those extra minutes here and there. Michael Trupp asks, it's kind of similar here, how are Ryan Sessegnon and Jack Clark doing? Will they be ready for the Premier League next season? Well, spoken about Sessegnon, Jack Clark, everyone was really pleased with him at the start of the season. Mourinho really happy with his training, felt he was really throwing himself into stuff really well and taking on board everything. Gave him, I think, 3 appearances, 2 in the Europa League off the bench, 1 against Mourinho in the FA Cup. And then the club decided, look, let's get him some time playing regularly. And he's done that on the whole at Stoke. He's had a little run of starts about a month ago. Recent games he's been back on the bench a bit, but he's playing football. And he's playing football at, a team that's got a decent standing. You know, you're not talking about a small team at all. And, yeah, it's been good for him. I'd probably be surprised if he'll be back in the Premier League with Spurs next season. I think it's probably, again, another one with a case of another loan to keep him developing. But he's, again, still very young. And hopefully has a bright future ahead of him. Steve Cohen asks, if you could put a price on Harry Kane, what would it be? Oh, man, honestly, Harry Kane is... This is my big thing with the Harry Kane stuff. And yes, I completely understand when Spurs fans just go bananas when they hear some of the things they'll hear, especially there were some odd things said in the commentary of the England game. It's all very strange. I get there's an interest and I get we need things to talk about, but it's almost like a constant, which is a little bit weird. And I cannot totally understand why Spurs fans get so upset about it. But for me, the reason that Spurs, and this is why I think it would be so difficult for anyone to buy Harry Kane this summer, and I've said this before, so I'm not going to go on too long, but essentially, he's got a big long-term deal, still till 2024, and I'd imagine there's probably an option for another year in there. He essentially does the job of 2 players, so if you ever to sell him, you'd need to sign, 2 players really to do the job he does at Tottenham, if not more. I think Spurs, Levy, whoever you want to call it, would want up there with club world record money for him. I think even 150 million, I think you're looking at more than that. I think you're looking at approaching 200 million because of the amount of the massive gaping hole he would leave in Tottenham Hotspur and need to be replaced. So I don't know if anyone signs him. I really don't. I can understand clubs wanting him, but I do think that when you look at that kind of price, you start to maybe overanalyze, and you look at the injury history, and you look at the fact that I think he's 28 this year, and you start to think, well, are there the likes of Haaland? Do you go for an Mbappe? Do you go for these people who, are younger, have got more time ahead of them and will not drop off in value? Whereas Harry Kane, phenomenal player, one of the best in the world, hands down. But, if he gets a couple of injuries and if, as he gets older, his price is going to drop and you'll have thrown a lot of money, and that's not even including wages and things like that, on a player who will depreciate in value. But, we'll see what happens in the summer. But I can't see how it happens myself unless it's just the most ridiculous bid comes in, and I don't know who that comes from. Alex Donnell asks, which 3 senior players are most likely to leave this summer? I could probably give an answer to this. It isn't probably the one you're looking at, but you could probably say Foyth, Carter-Vickers and Rose. They're senior players. Rose, end of his contract. Carter-Vickers, I think they'll probably sell on. Perhaps Bournemouth will buy him permanently. And Foyth, I think Villarreal would be mad not to take what is about 13 million option to buy on him. He's played 25 matches there, I think it is. Played at centre-back, right-back, defensive midfield, getting a lot of game time now, starting every week. I think they'd be crazy. That's a bargain. I think a player who'll be worth double that next season. So those 3. But I know you're probably looking for other kind of players we're talking about. I think a lot depends on Mourinho and what his future holds. I think Harry Winks, as things stand, will want to leave in the summer. I can't see why he wouldn't if Mourinho's still there, because I think he started something like... There really can't be many Premier League games. I had the stats yesterday. It's completely gone out of my head. He certainly, I think, has only started something like 2 in the last 12, maybe, in the Premier League, something like that. He would be one you'd imagine would want to go. I think Dele Alli in the current situation would want to go. But for me, I think Tottenham would probably prefer a loan deal. But again, this is the problem, as I've said in the past. Tottenham need money for transfers. Ultimately, decisions will have to be made. If they can get decent prices in a tough market for the likes of, I'd say, Winks, Ali, even maybe Sissoko, Aurier, Lamela, Gazaniga, players like that, I think you have to look at it and you have to decide. Some of those players, I'm a big Lamela fan, it, so I'm not going to go down that route. But what I would say is he'll only have a year, might even be a year. I can't remember if it's a year or 2 left on Lamela's contract, but there's probably an option on his as well. But you think with his injury history, do you then take any money you get? I wrote this in an article in the week and people were up a bit in uproar, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone who's in form right now, say a Lucas Moura, if a Spurs I know have turned down some big offers for him in the past, if another such big offer came in because of how well he's doing at the end of the season, I do wonder whether they look at that and they say he's going to be 29, I think. You look at that and you think, do we take a big offer for him and then look for he's in an area where there's a lot of players. Do we look at that and think, okay, maybe we're not going to get a bid for Lamela, say, but Lucas, kind of playing some of the best football he has in years, do we take the money for him and invest that money, say, in a new centre-back or something like that? You see what I mean? I totally understand why people wouldn't want to sell Lucas Moura right now. But perhaps you look at it over a longer term of consistency rather than recent form. I don't know. But I think this is going to be very much a summer where they look at what offers come in. Like I say, you've got, I think, Aurier, Sissoko, I think, has an extra option, an option for another year. But certainly some of these contracts of these players are coming to that point where you have to make a decision. New contract or sale. And I think you'll find with a few players, there's going to be some big decisions going to have to be made. Lewis Melcher asks, do you think we will buy Marcel Sabitzer? Spurs would like to sign him this summer. It's going to be a very tough one, though. There's going to be a lot of competition for him. Sounds like some of the big boys in the Premier League want him as well. Spurs, certainly, I know, like him a lot. They've been long-term admirers and are hoping to make a move this summer if they can get the fund. This is their key, and I hate being repetitive, but Tottenham's big obstacle is they need to get the money in because they've been absolutely devastated by the loss of income this year. They need to get the money in first to be then able to go for him. And then obviously the flip side to that is also, I know, and we'll come to this later, that priority is a centre-back. So do you, if you get any money in early on, say maybe for someone like Foyth, do you put that straight away towards a Sabitzer and then maybe try a little bit later in the window, get a centre-back, but then obviously that becomes a little bit more risky. But yeah, they want Sabitzer, 27, very good player, very versatile. Certainly some of those players that I've just mentioned, if they were to move on, that would certainly free up a space and money for Sabitzer, but it's all about that competition. Spurs aren't great when they're getting a bidding war, and the fact that he's only got 12 months left in his deal, the more competition, the more Leipzig will be able to ask for him as well, despite the year. And Spurs very much are ones, we saw it at Højbjerg. Højbjerg came in with 12 months in his deal left, and Spurs only paid 3 million more than what they got back for Kyle Walker-Peters going in the opposite direction. They do not want to spend a lot of money on a player with not a lot of time left on their contract. So, right, I'm really need to crack on. We're 30 minutes in and I'm not even halfway through the questions. Stephen Lloyd asks, would you take Gareth Bale back or put the wages towards another player? For me, there's two different Gareth Bales. The Gareth Bale in the month or so before the North London derby was absolutely worth it. I would so pay the money for him to come back to the club for another season, because that player is a game changer and can absolutely smash it. If you get the flat Gareth Bale before it and the Gareth Bale we got in the North London derby, then no, that money should go towards another player. There's part of me would love to see a Gareth Bale in that top form playing in front of the fans. It's kind of something we kind of got robbed of this season, which I think would have been lovely for the fans. And I do wonder, fans coming back, if they get to see him, and the merchandise, all of this stuff, whether actually, finance-wise, you start to even out a bit as well, in terms of him paying for himself, as it were. But yeah, let's see what the last couple of months of the season holds for Gareth Bale, and then I think we'll get a better indication of whether Spurs should look to kind of take up that first option to bring him back again next season. Kent Capers asks, do you think the younger lineup we saw against Aston Villa could be used against Manchester United, or was it just a message to the other players? Depends what they do. If they win, if they do well and play well against Newcastle United, it's a similar team. I don't think it will be exactly the same team, but if it is, then I think they should keep going with it. I think you keep the momentum going. Right, apologies for pronunciation again. Abrazov Aimic. Should we loan out Japhet Tanganga for game time or keep him as a backup? Well, there were a lot of loan offers for Japhet in January and Spurs turned them all down because they wanted to keep him in around the squad. I'd probably suggest he'll stay unless there's a lot of defenders suddenly come in a flood of transfers, which is unlikely. I think he starts to stake his claim for right back, I think, as well, especially if people leave in that position. Javi Ubari asks, who would be the first player Spurs will target in the transfer window? As I said, I think it will be a centre-back. From everything I understand, Spurs' priority this in summer is going to be a centre-back leader. Not just any old centre-back. I've seen a lot of young centre-backs linked, but they are after a leader. They feel that back line needs guidance. It needs someone to step in there and absolutely dominate it. And that's probably what they're missing right now. Toby Alderweireld, very good player, but especially with the fans not in, you can kind of hear how quiet he is. He will talk to other players, but I wouldn't say he's a shouter and a leader of that back line. Eric Dier maybe is, but obviously his form has been pretty inconsistent, certainly in recent months. Davinson Sanchez is someone who I won't go into too much, but I said before, needs someone alongside him to guide him. He can be very good with the right person alongside him. And Joe Rodon, I think the same. Joe Rodon could probably turn into a leader, but right now I think he's another young player who needs someone alongside him. So that's what Spurs are looking for. I've seen links with Botman, Lille, Vestergaard at Southampton. From what I understand, they're both wide of the mark. They're looking for more kind of different kinds of players, let's put it that way. I know there's certainly a big admiration for Joachim Andersen, who's at Fulham. They've looked at, I think Spurs have tried a couple of times to bring him in before. He's obviously a Lyon player at loan at Fulham. He ticks a lot of boxes because Spurs ideally want someone that's got Premier League experience to lessen the gamble. We've seen a lot of Spurs transfers where they've taken some time to adjust, even, to be fair, ones who've played in the Premier League. But with Anderson, he's He's 25. He's worn the captain's armband quite a lot this season, probably about half of it for Fulham, despite it being his first year in the Premier League. And obviously he's got that experience in the Premier League and he's played well. The obstacle with him, obviously, is he's got a decent length in his contract left, and Lyon have their own Daniel Levy and Jean-Michel Aulas. So Spurs know what it's like to deal with Lyon, and it's not the easiest. So that's maybe one to keep an eye on in the summer. I know also probably less of a chance of happening. I know they like Lewis Dunk at Brighton. Obviously, Brighton captain, a proper leader. What I would say with him, I think he's even more difficult to do because, again, I think he's 28, 29 years old. Long contract. I think it's till maybe 2025. And teams in the past have been quoted big money for him. So I'd be very surprised if he's one that comes in. But I know he's a player that Spurs like. And another one they like, who probably ticks less of the boxes, is Nicola Milenkovic for Fiorentina. I think he's a Serbian centre-back. He's younger. I think he's 23. He is a bit of a leader. He is a growing leader. I know he's captained Fiorentina a couple of times in the Coppa Italia this season. He's one that Spurs do like, but he hasn't played in the Premier League, which counts against him. He's slightly more of a risk, and at 23 you're bringing in maybe another of the Rodon Sanchez ilk, or that younger player who might be a bit of a gamble. So yeah, out of those three, I'd probably say Anderson ticks the most boxes. And there will be other centre-backs that fit that mould. But as far as I know, that's what they're looking for. A leader of a centre-back, preferably with Premier League experience to play in that back line. So let's see how that one works out. Akrit Pradham asks, would you ever consider getting a fan-voted question into press conferences? Oh, this is going to sound so harsh. No. No, I wouldn't. I totally understand why. And I understand there would be always frustrations with fans at what's asked in press conferences. But what I would say is what might seem like a really good question or a pressing question or a question born out of anger and frustration on social media, say, is probably not the kind of question you'd ask in a press conference. It's really difficult to explain. I think you probably would have to sit in a press conference and ask questions and understand, I've had some people tell me, it's just because you don't want to not be able to ask questions ever again. It's not like that. I have wound up and annoyed Pochettino, Mourinho. I've had press officers moan at me for things I've asked players. That's not the case. It's very much understanding how managers react, and you have to term and phrase questions in certain ways. Pochettino, for instance, you ask Pochettino formally in an official setting about tactics, say, shut down. Honestly, he was very much, a lot of the time, was not quite a holier than thou attitude or I know more than you. It was very much almost as if we're not going to talk about that. Whereas weirdly, if you spoke to him off camera and off the record and everything, he was brilliant and he would talk to you thoroughly about stuff, about tactics. Really fascinating. So yeah, you've got to term things in a different way, and that's why. What I'd say as well, I could be completely wrong, but the way I approach press conferences, I try to tap into what fans want to know. I try to keep abreast of what fans want to know about from the manager and stuff like that. So hopefully often you'll see that my questions are ones that maybe are more geared towards things that I know Tottenham fans want to know. I'm not going to go in with the aggression that a lot of the questions are, why are you so rubbish, kind of thing that I get told to ask. But a fan-voted question, hopefully I kind of ask what people want to be asked a lot of the time anyway. I think my questions are often slightly different to what the Mourinho or Pochettino before him or the players will have been asked by other people, I hope. If you see what I mean. Right, Chad Mercer asks, why has talk around Son's contract gone quiet? I think that's just purely because of the time we're in, the circumstances we're in. Very few new contracts being announced. As far as I understand, everything's still the case it was. Son wants to stay, Spurs want him to stay. But I just think timing-wise, Especially, Spurs just took a big old loan out, didn't they? Not too far back from the Bank of England, with the pandemic on. It's not like Son's contract's about to run out. I think perhaps in the summer, when things stabilise and when fans are back in grounds, then you're able to commit to these deals fully and have them signed and sealed. So I wouldn't panic about that too much. I think people may be worrying a little bit too much about that situation. I don't think there's the cause to, but I get why people do. THFC 1882 asks, are Spurs in more trouble than others due to their stadium? Two sides to this. I'd say the stadium, definitely they put all their finances into a big stadium-sized basket, which, having not been able to use it for a year, of course, absolute nightmare. All of the game-changing revenue for Spurs was not there. We're not even just talking about Premier League. You're talking about NFL. You're talking about concerts like Lady Gaga, Guns N' Roses, Capital Summertime Ball were meant to be there. There were rugby events. There was the Anthony Joshua fight. There's various events that would be held at the stadium. That's not even including merchandise, food and drink, everything like that you sell around event days. So Spurs have lost millions. I think Levy maybe said something about a potential loss of, did he say something like 200, 250 million perhaps for Tottenham for the next year? So it'd be interesting to see. I think the next set of financial results shouldn't be that long away from coming out. And that will give us an indication up to a certain point, but I still don't think it will give us the bulk of the loss. And obviously there's a TV rebate that they have to pay back as well. What I would say is that the criticism Spurs got in the past for the way they were run, which was cautious, especially with building the stadium, may help them in the long term. I think there's a lot of clubs out there public don't know how near the wall they're running or have been running. A lot of these clubs are still playing the players. The players haven't taken a pay cut or anything like that, and there's no income, but they're paying huge wages. That's where the problems lie. So somewhere in the middle for Spurs, but definitely the stadium's going to be a big issue. But hopefully it's the stadium that will get them out of it once fans are allowed back in. Sebastian Martin asks, favourite away ground and best memories of Spurs inside a stadium. Favourite away ground? Two different views here. On a purely selfish, greedy, food-related note, Chelsea away, back when we were able to go into stadiums and have press food. And Chelsea's press food is incredible. Everything you can imagine in a buffet, it's there. They spend a lot of money on their press food. But that is purely from a greedish, fat bloke perspective. In terms of stadiums themselves, loved going to the US Bank Stadium in America on the preseason tour where the Minnesota Vikings play their NFL games. It's the closest stadium I've seen to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I do love old style grounds. Being at Villa Park a couple of weeks back was great. Goodison Park is very similar as well. I'd say that. I've been very fortunate. My job's taken me to the San Siro, the Bernabeu, the Camp Nou. I've been very fortunate to see a lot of cool grounds. But in terms of the actual structure itself, for someone that was a bit of a stadium nerd during the building of the Spurs Stadium, I loved the US Bank Stadium. It was very cool. In terms of favourite experiences in grounds, White Hart Lane farewell, final game, incredible. That's the most emotion I've felt around me in a match. That was incredible privilege to be able to report on. And then, as I've said before, the match that night in Amsterdam with Lucas Moura's hat-trick was incredible. Even with beer being thrown down by the Ajax fans onto all of our laptops and ruining a lot of them. Incredible night. Incredible. Very, very fortunate to have been at nights like that. Jay Rich asks, do you think Jose can still be successful at Spurs with more time? All about the players. If he can get the players behind him and they all move in the right direction, then yes. If he can't, then no. It's a very different project to what he's had before. He's having to... A lot of the other ones, he's had instant success because the money's been there. He's been able to make changes quite quickly. With Tottenham, that money isn't there. And this is more about his coaching. It's going to be more about his man management. And we'll be interested to see where we see a flip side. And it's all flipped around and whether the success comes the more he progresses. As I think I said in the last video, he's improved from last season. Spurs have got more points, conceded less goals, scored more goals. They're in a higher position in the league than they were at this point last season. But Spurs want him to be better than Pochettino was, not better than Mourinho's first half season. So, yeah, all about the players for me when it comes to Mourinho and having that support. Astle Matthew asks, any news on the stadium sponsor? Nothing as of yet, but certainly the arrival of Todd Klein as the new Chief Financial Officer is a big one because he started work last month, and from what I've heard from a few people inside the club, people are really impressed with him. He's been brought in to do a lot of obviously financial stuff like partnership agreements and things like that, but primarily obviously one of his big things will be helping getting these naming rights. He's got experience in it. He got the Miami Dolphins, he got them their stadium deal a couple of years back, which was far more valuable than their value as a franchise suggested, and Spurs are hoping he brings that similar quality to Tottenham. I mean, I've seen a lot of reports saying that Spurs are looking for something like 250 million. From everything that I've heard, Spurs want way more than that. Spurs feel that they've got one of the best stadiums in the world, and you look at the LA Rams, LA Chargers have just had their new stadium built, the SoFi Stadium. I think it opened about a year ago. I think that Social Finance, I think it is, that sponsored that, they paid something like, it's about 327 million, I think it was. Spurs will be looking for that sort of money or more. Spurs feel that their stadium is one of the best, most state-of-the-art stadiums in the world and will be looked at as the only purpose-built NFL stadium outside America. It could have its own franchise there. It's going to have Premier League and hopefully, maybe next season, if not the one after, the Champions League back there. It's the best concerts in the world are going to be there and the biggest sporting events. So Tottenham kind of feel that they shouldn't, just because there's been a pandemic, rush sell right now and get a lower price than they should do. They there's a belief that it deserves a certain value, and Todd Klein certainly has the background to be able to deliver it. So keep an eye on that. I think it'll be sooner rather than later we see movement on that front because of his involvement. Oh my goodness, this is a name that I'm going to have a nightmare pronouncing. Sifosake, maybe? Nizello. If Mourinho was sacked, who do you think would be the replacement? Obviously, I hope he isn't. I hope that he does turn things around at Spurs. But if he doesn't, I know that both Julian Nagelsmann and Brendan Rodgers have got a lot of admirers within Tottenham. I think Rodgers would probably be the more expensive to bring in, but is less of a gamble because of his Premier League experience. Whereas Nagelsmann, I know, he's very well liked within Tottenham, and I think he certainly would be in the running. I think for the future, if he continues on his current path, I know Scott Parker has got a lot of friends and admirers again within inside Tottenham, but I do wonder with him whether it's very early in his managerial career. He'll probably have seen what's happened to Frank Lampard and suddenly stepping up to a big job and maybe just hold on a little bit, but maybe for the long term. What else we got here? We've got Ben Wayman asks, is Steven Bergvine happy at Spurs? He's deleted all of his Spurs stuff from social media. He's not going to be delighted. The fans haven't been great for it. I'm not saying all the fans, but certain fans have targeted him because of his lack of goals this season, and it wasn't very pleasant, some of it that I saw. So he hasn't taken all of his Spurs stuff off. He's taken off all the stuff from this season off of there. I don't think he'll be delighted with this season. I don't think he'll be happy with probably his own lack of, I'd say, a final product, but I think he's done well. I think he's probably, as an overall player, has progressed his overall game, his work rate, everything about that. But yeah, I think he'll want a much better season next time around. There's a lot of talent there. For me, I just wanted him to go away with the Netherlands and score a goal just to click him into that confidence. I think you see this with players so much. All it needs is a bit of confidence, and suddenly they become a different player. I've really got to crack on now because I've still got about 10 questions left. John Berenger Webb, hopefully I pronounced that right. Do you foresee Vinny playing up front with Kane with Kane moving into a 10 role? We kind of saw it. It worked to an extent against Villa. I would imagine with Son back in the team, maybe Vinicius' chances aren't quite as regular. But yeah, I certainly can see it happening in a few games for the rest of the season, definitely. Rachel Sandberg asks, when players watch matches on TV when they're out injured or suspended, do you think they bother listening? Do they listen to the commentary? That's an interesting one. I'd probably say yes. I think from what I can tell, a lot of the foreign players watch the TV from their own country. They obviously have their big old satellites and able to get it. So, like, say, Lucas would be watching the Brazilian Premier League coverage. So, I imagine it would. It'd be a bit weird to sit there just in silence. I don't think players are that bothered too much, probably, by that sort of stuff. Maybe than we think they are. But interesting question. Lebone Monarchy. Oh my goodness, I'm so bad at this. Lebone Monarchy. I'm so sorry. Please tell me how to pronounce it in the comments afterwards. As a journalist, do you watch regularly other football YouTube channels? And if so, which do you like? Oh man, I have to be kind of honest about this, obviously, because I don't want to lie. That'd be a bit crap. I don't really. Purely because I don't really get a lot of spare time. This job's quite a kind of all-encompassing one, and in my spare time, I probably don't look towards what fan YouTube channels are probably saying as much, mainly because I kind of know what fans think of stuff. Social media obviously lets me know that all the time, so I don't. But what I would say is they all do such a good job. I know the boys who do the We Are Tottenham TV. I've met them out on a couple of the European away trips. Really nice guys, do a really good job in what they do. Chris Cowlin, I met him a few times. I think I was maybe been in his videos a couple of times out on away trips. He's a very nice chap. With all his he's got a group of mates. He's often away on European trips. They're really nice as well. I tell a lie. There was one I did watch not too long ago. Was George Akia. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, George. He did a really good video, which he got access to go in with a few other, I think they call them influencers, stuff like that, to go in and do like training sessions at Hotspur Way with Carlos Lalin, the fitness coach. That I watched, and I remember because I sent him a message saying how good it was. That for me is the kind of stuff I'd watch because it gives me something a little different that I wouldn't otherwise know. I've never gone inside and done a training session at Spurs. I've watched training, I've been able to do that, but never actually experienced myself. So for me, that was something that was, it was utterly new for me. So that was why I watched that, and I straight away sent them a message saying how good it was. This is the thing, the production values. All of these people that I've mentioned are terrific. I don't have those production values. It is literally me on a couch chatting away. That's all I do. That's all I ever kind of planned for this to be, and that's all it's meant to be. Theirs is a very different product, and they're terrific. Obviously I've seen little clips and stuff that I see on the internet of them, and they all have their very different way. There's an expressions chap who seems like quite a character. Once at Wembley, in the press box, we had him sitting in one of the seats in front, and he was doing all his stuff like throughout the game, looking into his phone or camera on a stick, whatever it was. I think some of the press guys weren't delighted because obviously they were trying to watch the game, but I find it all quite fun. It's, good luck to everyone. This is the beauty of football, and this is hopefully why people engage with what I say is we're just talking football. It's just like, we all want to talk about it. We all want to chat about it, and that's where a lot of the fun comes from. So, yeah, I know other clubs have their channels and they provoke a lot of different opinions about them, but I think, ultimately, at the end of the day, everyone just wants to talk football, and best of luck to them. It's I love doing it, and hopefully that comes across in this. But yeah, no, in my spare time, probably don't really watch stuff like that. I, for example, not that anyone really cares about this, but I like to listen to Talking Sopranos podcast. It's absolutely brilliant. And other than that, in my spare time, it's mostly watching movies and TV shows. I'm a bit of a, as you might have told, might have been made aware, I'm a bit of a movie nerd. I love all of that stuff, and I love certain TV shows as well. So, very much a nerd. or geek, depending on which way you want to see it. So, yeah. Mike Stockdale asked, do we need to trim the squad and use the money to buy one stellar signing? Totally get the logic on that, and I understand that. But what I would say is Spurs' problem in the past has always been not having a good squad and actually having a really good 11. So I'd say probably Spurs need a better squad to last a whole season. Kind of being the sum of your parts, as it were, rather than one or two top individuals who could just get injured, and then you're left with a small squad and an injured star. James Valaitis asks, more than anyone, you emphasise homegrown requirements. Do the rules have pros? Do you believe these rules have positive or negative impacts on football? I think any rule where you can get more of your homegrown players playing is a good thing. I'll be honest with you. I think the demands and the financial pressures on football are so much that clubs are so unwilling to take risks, and they'll just try and buy the next big thing rather than develop it themselves. And I think any way we can get clubs using young players, this is partly my hope, is if this is a tough summer for Tottenham financially, we see more of these young players come through. And I think there's a question about to come on them, so I'll wait. I won't go too heavy on that one. Mr. V asked, what does the future hold for Eric Dier? We'll see this summer. As I've said, they want a new centre-back leader, and from what I'm told, they'll be looking to move on one of those centre-backs to finance that deal and to make room for the new centre-back. So for me, it all depends on who the offer comes in for. You know, people know my thoughts on Davinson Sanchez, so I won't go down that route. Eric Dier, both he and Sanchez, I think, probably bring in the most money in terms of the defenders. So perhaps it's whoever the offer comes in for, and then they've got a decision to make. I think Dier's got certainly talents, but I just think his confidence is so low and he's just struggling to find that consistency. And I'd love him to be able to find it again at Tottenham, but I'm not sure whether he will or not. We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully he will. Hopefully he will. He's a very clever guy, honestly. It's fascinating to interview. Absolutely fascinating. Joe Lawson asks, if Vinicius goes back to Benfica, do you think Tottenham would look to sign another striker or use Scarlett and Parrott as the backups? Certainly one of them. I think it'll be Dane Scarlett. I think Dane Scarlett is going to be promoted to the first team next season, and he will be there to get minutes. If Vinicius goes, I don't think you then bring Troy Parrott in, because then you've got a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old as your backups, which is a bit risky. I think Spurs will look to bring in another experienced striker then. Itan asks, do you think Dane Scarlett, Harvey White and Alfie Devine will be more prominent in the first team squad next season? I think Dane Scarlett will certainly get more minutes. I think Alfie Devine will get more minutes as well. I'd say Harvey White, probably being slightly older, I think he's 19. I don't think he's 20 yet. I think he'll get another loan. I think that's still going to be a crowded midfield next season. I think the best thing for Harvey is to go out, and his loan at Portsmouth's been a bit hit and miss. He's been getting minutes, scored a fabulous first ever senior goal with a header. It was a lovely goal. I think it was Oxford United he scored against. So I think another season for him, just playing regular football and just continuing to develop is massive for him. But I think Dane Scarlett and Alfie Devine, being 17 and 16 respectively, next season will be back getting more and more little minutes here and there. And, they are potential stars, real stars in the making. So if they can get that time and take any chances that come to them, who knows what could happen. Final question. We got there just within the hour, although I'm pretty sure I'll go over the hour mark with this. Braden Ellis asked, during press conferences, why does Sky Sports always go first and ask multiple questions why others don't? So, I think Sky Sports pretty much go first because of the rights. They pay for the rights, and a lot of football clubs' money comes from Sky Sports in the domestic rights anyway. So, I don't think any of us quibble with that. It's only pre-match press conferences. Post-match, you'll see that any of us will go. Sometimes I have to do it because I don't always like asking the first post-match one, because it's always, what did you think of the match? That's pretty much always the way you start, because you want to then see what you've got to work with from his answer. So I kind of prefer someone to ask that, but sometimes you can see no one wants to ask it, so I'll do it. Pre-match, yeah, Sky Sports get in there and they ask a few, and then you'll get the other TV companies, Premier League productions, and then you'll get the radio guys will go, and then us, rest of kind of written, not for the separate written section, will go in that bit. And you'll probably find with my questions, I'll often try to think of something that hasn't been asked, or like I said earlier, something that the fans maybe want to know slightly more than what has been asked thus far. But yeah, I don't have any issue with Sky Sports have their questions. I think they pay a hell of a lot of money. And yeah, it is what it is. It is. Yes, in these COVID times, sometimes we're not getting a lot of time for questions. It can be a little bit compacted, whereas in an actual live press conference setting, we might say, oh, and I've got another one. Whereas on a press conference Zoom, that mute button comes in and you can, sometimes people might wonder why we don't follow up on questions. It's because that mute button's been pressed and it's time for the next person. That's why, which can be very frustrating. That is certainly a frustration. But we'll get back to normal press conferences soon and we'll be able to kind of come back on questions and stuff. But yeah, no issues with Sky Sports starting off. If I was paying millions upon millions to football clubs, then I'd probably expect to go first as well. But there you go. We got to the end. I didn't think I was going to get it towards the hour. I thought I was going to absolutely fly over that. So, again, apologies if I didn't answer your question. Apologies if I went too quickly over your question. But I tried to fit in as many as I could. Like I said, there were hundreds more I couldn't use. But hopefully I've got a good old cross-section of the questions that people are asking. But yeah, so back to things tomorrow. Press conference tomorrow with Mourinho from Hotspur Way, albeit on Zoom still. And then we're back in action at the weekend with Tottenham at Newcastle United, and hopefully keep some of the momentum from the Villa match. Like I said before, the international break, I think it would have given people a little chance to clear their heads, take a breath, and come back and realise that 3 points off fourth place, cup final still to play. This could be a really good end to the season for Tottenham if the players want it enough. Hopefully they do. So yeah, we'll end it there. Thank you so much for all your questions. And as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Bye.